We begin with the war in Ukraine. Shelling continues in parts of the country, despite Russia's claims it would pull back its military. Now, U.S. intelligence is saying Russian President Vladimir Putin might be misled by his own military commander. CBS News' Skyler Henry has the latest.
A U.S. official tells CBS News there's tension between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his military leaders, and that Putin may be misinformed about the poor performance of Russia's military and the economy.
One of the Achilles heels of autocracies is that you don't have people in those systems who speak truth to power or who have the ability to speak truth to power. And I think that is something that we're seeing in Russia.
Ukrainian officials say airstrikes continue in the northern city of Chernihiv and near the capital, Kyiv, just a day after Russia claimed it would drastically reduce military operations in those two regions.
Our best assessment is less than 20% over the last 24 hours now we've seen to start to reposition.
In a nearly hour-long phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky Wednesday, President Biden discussed security assistance and pledged to provide $500 million directly to the Ukrainian government. Here on Capitol Hill, a top U.S. military commander told a House panel that Russia's war in Ukraine could lead to a change in posture for troops in Europe.
This is an opportunity as a result of this senseless act on behalf of Russia to re-examine the permanent military architecture that exists not only in Eastern Europe, but in our air policing activity in aviation and in our standing naval maritime groups.
Earlier, a group of lawmakers met with members of Ukraine's parliament.
They are courageous, they are resilient, and the United States stands with them.
The United Nations now says 4 million people have fled Ukraine since Russia's invasion began, creating a massive refugee crisis. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams joins me now from Kyiv, Ukraine. Holly, what has been the reaction in Ukraine to the recent round of talks in Istanbul?
Well, Major, yesterday in particular, there seemed to be sort of positive signs coming out of those negotiations, with the Russians saying that they were going to, quote, radically reduce their military operations in the direction of Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, and then also Chernihiv, which is a city just to the north of Kyiv. But then just hours later, Chernihiv came under assault again. It was bombarded by the Russians, according to local officials, and we've seen video that certainly seems to bear that out. So I think that Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky really encapsulated things when he said, look, there are positive signs, but, quote, they don't silence the explosions of Russian shelling. And I think that Zelensky's skepticism is shared by many, if not most, Ukrainians. We traveled with a convoy of Ukrainian soldiers today, just busloads full of Ukrainian fighters heading to reinforce the front line. And we spoke to one soldier who just signed up a few weeks ago. And I asked him whether the Russians could be trusted in these talks, and he laughed very loudly. And then he said, come on, is that a joke? And then he talked about how for months Russia said that it had no plans to invade Ukraine, and then it went ahead anyway and invaded this country. The other thing that you hear here in Ukraine is people saying, look, the only reason that the Russians are talking at all is that their invasion is not going to plan. And, you know, there may be some truth in that. As we know, the Russians have run into much tougher resistance from the Ukrainians than many people expected. Their operation appears to have stalled in many parts of Ukraine, and the Russians do seem to be taking very heavy losses, including between 7,000 and 15,000 Russian troops killed, according to one NATO official.
So a spokesman for the Kremlin said today there were no breakthroughs in these latest rounds of negotiations with Ukraine. Is there a way to characterize, Holly, what both sides either are seeking or demanding?
Well, one thing that Russia very much wants is Ukrainian neutrality, which essentially means that Ukraine would not be able to have or form any military alliances like Switzerland. Interestingly, in just this month, President Zelensky has said that Ukraine understands now that it's not going to join NATO, and that was a sort of long-held wish on the part of the Ukrainian government. And Ukraine has also signalled that it's willing to discuss neutrality with the Russians. However, for its part, Ukraine wants binding security guarantees, and it hopes that that would come from a set of countries, including the US. But I guess underpinning these negotiations is one big question, which is how serious the Russians really are about negotiating. And there's certainly the suspicion, at least in some quarters, that the Russians are essentially trying to buy time while they reconfigure their forces.
And you mentioned a moment ago, Holly, talking to some who are in the fight in Ukraine. You've been speaking with Ukrainian soldiers about that fight. What do they have to say about either Russia's military actions or Russia's military effectiveness?
Well, look, there's been a lot of reporting about the apparent ineptitude or incompetence of Russian forces during this invasion. And in fact, an American official told CBS News today that the US believes that Vladimir Putin is being misinformed by his own advisors about how badly the Russian military is performing because they're too afraid to tell him the truth. Now, that's perhaps not particularly surprising. That's the kind of thing that happens in authoritarian regimes or with authoritarian-minded leaders. But if you want the view from Ukraine, we spoke with a Ukrainian officer, a second lieutenant, earlier this week. She's actually a very interesting character. She's a former politician, a mother of two. She's now a frontline fighter. She is tasked with taking out Russian tanks using those anti-tank weapons that we've seen so much of. We asked her about the performance of the Russians, and she said they're fighting stupidly. She said they have no strategy or tactics. They make the same mistakes over and over again, and their officers simply tell them to advance. So that's a pretty damning portrait of Russia's military performance here in Ukraine from the front line.
Holly Williams, thank you for that reporting, that perspective. You and your team, please stay safe. We thank you.